Why does your nervous system crave the familiar even if it hurts? Okay. So if you've ever wondered, why do I keep going back to what hurts me or what I know is unhealthy for me, even when I know better? That can be a very frustrating circumstance. And maybe you're in this situation, particularly if you're here, you've probably done some inner work. You've read some books, watched some videos, attended some workshops. Maybe you've even purchased some online courses. And still, there might be a part of you that feels very attracted to what is familiar. And by familiar, I mean maybe it is emotional unavailability. Maybe it is emotional bullying or manipulation. Maybe it is a habit of chasing love, or maybe it is a habit of closing up and rejecting love. And so, even when that kind of familiarity might leave you feeling anxious, lonely, or questioning your worth, it can be very hard to break those patterns. And that is because our nervous systems are wired for what it knows, not necessarily for what is healthy or for what is healing. So I might have you think of this as, repetition is not random. It's more of a roadmap that is directing us towards what I'm going to call our core attachment wounding. So our attachment blueprints are shaped, long before we ever get into young adulthood and the dating world, and long before we know how to really adequately name and articulate what we need, right? So if love felt like an emotional hot and cold growing up, then inconsistency might feel like chemistry now. If your parent shut down or denied their emotions, I'm fine, when clearly they weren't, and every one of your instincts was telling you that they weren't, maybe now you start questioning your instincts, suppressing what you feel like you intuitively know, or suppressing your needs entirely. If you are expected to take care of their feelings, and this is usually the case where there's a lot of guilt tripping going on. Oh, I'm such a bad mother, right? Now you have to reassure them. You become emotionally crowded out. And so now you might feel like you're selfish just for having your own feelings, or like you don't even have a right to your feelings. So they're not just memories, these are basically like internalized and embodied love maps. And unless we are intentionally rewriting them, we tend to follow them on a type of autopilot. So, from a neurobiological perspective, your nervous system is really designed to keep you safe. And so, safety in this context means predictability. So, what your brain and nervous system knows, it trusts, even if that hurts. So, if chaos, criticism, or neglect were a part of that early emotional environment, then your brain created these kind of well-worn grooves and neural pathways in and around those experiences. So the message we got wasn't, this is painful, let's stay away from that, because you couldn't, because we were helpless at the time and dependent at the time. So the message becomes, well, we've survived this before, we know how this works, so let's just keep doing that. And the system keeps you hooked. That's why sometimes when we finally get into a situation with a more secure or calm person, that calm can feel suspicious. That's why sometimes genuine intimacy can be a little unsettling. And that's why emotional stability or peace might make it feel like what's wrong, right? Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. But really, it's kind of brilliant because it is finding ways to make the best use of the resources available to you. And we're talking about your body now as a resource, right? So, as children, we can't just say, wow, my parents really don't have the tools for this whole child rearing thing. That's really not about me. That's on them. And I think I'm just going to pack my bags and move down the street and go live with Susie for a while, right? We can't do that. We can't do that. So instead, that younger part of us says, well, if they're distant, then that must mean that I'm too much. If I upset them, that must mean that I'm wrong. If they don't see and acknowledge me, maybe that means I don't matter. And so this is how we get into a habit of crowding ourselves out emotionally. We minimize our needs. We wind up walking on eggshells. Or we might swing in the opposite direction. We tend to build these kind of icy walls and pretend not to need anybody at all. And so this is what I call the validation trap. It leads us to start relying on what's outside of us to affirm and validate our worth. We can slip into repeating old patterns, becoming a rescuer, a fixer, a pleaser, or even a lone wolf, just to feel like we're adequate enough. And if we don't get some kind of external affirmation, confirmation, or approval, we turn it in on ourselves. We start blaming ourselves for things. But we can heal if we're able to kind of confront that original wound and work through it on the mind, on the level of the mind and the body. Because the nervous system is flexible, it can learn. It is capable of healing and learning new patterns. We can create these new neural pathways that I was talking about, ones that don't equate inconsistency with chemistry or passion. So we can, in this process, learn to receive a more secure type of love without pulling away, to feel safe without constantly scanning for danger. And so it does start with that awareness. And then I think it evolves now through somatic practices, meaning we're connecting to the way that's all stored in the body. And in my work, using creative arts therapies approaches, where now we're connecting to it in the body and we're accessing this awesome creative power that we have to visualize, to envision, to imagine, to believe, and think differently. And to get it out of the body through expressive means, whether that's drawing, singing, music, painting in dramatic ways. But we get that energy out, we move it along, and that was where we start to see and understand our own agency to make change in our lives. So bringing this, to a close, if you feel like you're stuck in a loop, maybe it feels like it's a different partner, but it's a similar kind of pain, a familiar kind of pain, or if the calm has started to feel too quiet and the chaos you still tend to equate with love, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just alerting you to where you may be on your path. And it's alerting you to a pattern that may be stuck on repeat because that pattern protected you at one point. It was the most functional way to navigate and survive perhaps a dysfunctional environment. But that doesn't have to define you forever, right? We can update that love map. We can rewrite that blueprint. And when we do, that's when we start being able to soften and open up and receive love and allow for safety in a way that's not scary. So it becomes steady instead of slippery, right? And we're able to escape that validation trap and connect to something that allows us to know our inherent worth from a transcendent place, right? From the essence of your spirit, your intuitive self, let's say. Because you don't have to feel worthy first before you are worthy. You just are. Okay. So I hope that that was helpful. And if anyone relates to this, you can drop a comment there in the chat, or if you can connect to this, I'd love to know that. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.